There comes a moment in every generation where truth collides with comfort, where the call from heaven pierces rough the noise of a distracted world, and where the voice of warning is not given to frighten, but to awaken. That moment is not in some distant future. It is now. The words of warning ring out like thunder across the ages. Archangel Michael warns, "Stop, you will lose God if you don't listen to him." This is not poetry. This is not myth. This is not just symbolic language to make us feel spiritual. This is a cry from eternity, calling you back to the only thing that matters, to the anchor of your soul, to the one who holds the destiny of nations and the eternity of men in his hands. And yet, the tragedy of our time is that people have grown numb to warnings. They think every voice from heaven is just another inspirational quote, another motivational soundbite, something to scroll past and forget. But this is not that. This is not entertainment. This is the line between life and death, between light and darkness, between keeping God close or losing him forever. When the Archangel warns, it is because heaven has already measured the weight of our choices. It has already seen the trajectory of our hearts. It knows the dangers of compromise, of apathy, of ignoring the voice of God. And what is that warning today? Stop. Stop before it is too late. Stop before your excuses carry you over the cliff. Stop before the desires of this world steal the inheritance of your soul. Stop before pride hardens your heart beyond return. Stop before you lose the very God who formed you, who has carried you, who has pleaded with you again and again to turn back. You cannot outrun the patience of God forever, because patience is not permission and delay is not approval. There comes a point when the window closes, when the call grows silent, when you have so dulled your ears that even heaven's trumpet cannot shake you. Look around you. We live in a time where rebellion is celebrated as freedom, where truth is treated as hate, where morality is mocked as outdated, and where the very foundations of faith are being traded for comfort, entertainment, and shallow distractions. And in the middle of this, you are being told, "I listen, obey, return," because the price of ignoring God is not just difficulty in this life. It is losing God himself. And losing God is not like losing a possession, or losing a job, or losing a friend. To lose God is to lose the very source of life, the very breath in your lungs, the very light in your eyes, the very reason you exist. To lose him is to lose hope, to lose eternity, to lose everything. We are not speaking about minor adjustments here. We are not talking about improving your habits or making a few resolutions. The Archangel's warning cuts deeper than that. It is saying that the very essence of your soul hangs in the balance, and your refusal to listen will cost you God himself. This is not a warning meant for somebody else, not for that politician you don't like, not for that celebrity who mocks faith, not for the neighbor who never goes to church. It is for you. It is for the one who thinks they can put off obedience until tomorrow. It is for the one who thinks compromise isn't a big deal. It is for the one who thinks God's mercy will excuse their willful rebellion. It is for every person who has heard the voice of truth but keeps silencing it with business, distraction, or pride. Why is this warning so urgent? Because every day you ignore the voice of God, your heart grows harder. Every compromise makes it easier to compromise again. Every sin left unrepented builds a wall higher and higher until the light no longer breaks through. And when the Archangel says stop, it is because heaven sees the end of that road. You don't. You see the thrill, the pleasure, the convenience, the short-term gain, but heaven sees the eternal loss. Heaven sees you forfeiting your place with God. Heaven sees you clinging to dust while losing the eternal treasure of his presence. There is a spiritual war raging right now, one you cannot see with your eyes, but one that is more real than the ground beneath your feet. You are not a spectator in this war, you are a target. The enemy of your soul does not just want to make your life difficult. He wants you to lose God. He wants to convince you that the warning is optional, that compromise is harmless, that disobedience is not fatal, And if he cannot destroy you with obvious sin, he will distract you with endless noise, so that you never stop long enough to hear the voice that says, "Stop, listen, return." But think about this: if Archangel Michael himself is sounding the alarm, what does that tell us? It tells us the seriousness of the hour. It tells us that heaven's patience is wearing thin with a generation that mocks holiness. It tells us that the battle has escalated to the point where the generals of heaven are declaring, "Enough." And if heaven has declared enough, then how much more must we examine our own hearts, our own loyalties, our own willingness to listen before it is too late? This is not fear-mongering. This is reality. When a parent shouts to their child who is running into traffic, that is not hate, it is love. When a doctor warns a patient of a deadly disease, that is not cruelty, it is compassion. And when heaven warns you that ignoring God will cost you God, it is not condemnation, it is mercy. Because once you lose Him, there is no substitute. Once you lose Him, no wealth, no achievement, no relationship, no pleasure can fill the void. Once you lose Him, eternity itself becomes loss. So I ask you, what is worth losing God for? Is it worth it to hold on to your pride, your resentment, your addiction, your greed? Is it worth it to trade away the eternal for a few moments of temporary comfort? Is it worth silencing the voice of God so you can keep listening to the applause of men? What could possibly be worth the loss of the very creator of your soul? And yet millions leave as though it is a fair trade. Millions ignore the warning. Millions gamble with eternity, hoping they can enjoy the world now and find God later. But later is not promised. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And the Archangel is saying stop now, because every step further away is a step closer to losing the one who made you. The weight of this message is not meant to paralyze you with fear, but to awaken you to urgency. To shake you from the illusion that you can afford to delay. To remind you that the greatest danger is not the world around you, but the hardness of your own heart if you keep refusing to listen. And heaven is still merciful enough to warn you, to call you back, to plead with you one more time. The very fact that you are hearing this warning means you still have time to respond, but time is not endless and warnings are not infinite. When heaven speaks, the wise do not debate, they do not procrastinate, they do not argue. They listen. There is a reason why every generation needs a voice of warning, because every generation has the temptation to forget who God is and what happens when we live as though He does not matter. The pattern of history is undeniable. Nations rise when they honor God. Families flourish when they are rooted in truth. Individuals prosper when they walk in obedience. But when people turn away, when they choose to silence His voice, when they chase after idols and distractions, the decline is inevitable. It has happened before, and it is happening again in our time. We are living in an age of noise, of endless entertainment, of counterfeit truths, and it is into this chaos that the warning comes. The message is not whispered politely, it is not hidden in a corner, it is declared with urgency. Because eternity is at stake, Archangel Michael warns, stop, you will lose God if you don't listen to Him. These words are not metaphorical, they are a divine reality. They are not just meant for the overly religious or the spiritually curious, they are meant for everyone who is alive right now. It is a call that transcends culture, politics, race, age, and background. It cuts through to the core of your soul. The danger today is not that people have never heard of God, but that they have grown so familiar with the idea of Him that they treat His voice as optional. People think listening to God is one choice among many, as though ignoring Him carries no consequences. They convince themselves that silence will protect them, that compromise will buy them time, that business will excuse their negligence. But the warning is clear: ignoring Him is not neutral, it is loss. The loss is not merely material, it is not simply missing out on blessings in this life, it is the loss of God Himself. To lose God is to lose the very reason for existence, the foundation of hope, the anchor of eternity. It is to be cut off from the one who gives meaning to everything else. And if we do not understand the seriousness of that, it is only because we have numbed ourselves to reality. We need to be honest about where we are. We live in a culture that worships self. We glorify personal freedom at the expense of truth. We celebrate rebellion as though it were courage. We laugh at morality as though it were weakness. We create our own gods out of fame, money, and pleasure, and then we wonder why we feel so empty, so restless, so dissatisfied. The Archangel's warning is not just about religion, it is about reality. You cannot replace God with substitutes and expect life to work. You cannot fill a God-shaped void with temporary thrills and expect to find peace. You cannot push away the one who created you and expect the creation to satisfy you. And yet this is what millions are doing every single day. They think they are free, but they are enslaved to desires that will never satisfy. They think they are enlightened, but they are stumbling in darkness. They think they are gaining the world, but they are losing God. When the Archangel says stop, he is not asking you to pause for reflection, he is commanding you to break your trajectory. Stop chasing the things that are stealing your soul. Stop ignoring the voice that has been calling you. Stop silencing your conscience every time it convicts you. Stop pretending that compromise is harmless. Stop before you lose God, because there comes a moment where the heart grows so hard, where the ears grow so deaf, that even when God speaks, you no longer recognize his voice. And that is the most terrifying reality. Not that God stops speaking, but that you stop hearing. That you become so consumed with your own way that the way of truth no longer penetrates. That is why the warning comes now. That is why it is urgent. Because delay is dangerous. Because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to turn back. Chosen one, this is your hour. Step into your financial miracle now. There are moments in every life where the weight of time and circumstance gathers like storm clouds, and suddenly the horizon brightens with a single shaft of light. That light is not the kind you invent, nor the kind you can control with your own hand. It is given, often at the most unexpected moment, to remind you that your story has always been larger than the tally of your failures and stronger than the scars of your disappointments. Many have spent years believing themselves destined to live as though provision were forever rationed, as though their portion was always just enough to survive, but never enough to overflow. Yet the truth whispers otherwise. You were not meant to crawl endlessly in scarcity, but to stand upright in the dignity of abundance, the kind that testifies to heaven's favor and not merely to human effort. What we call a financial miracle is not the crude accumulation of gold and silver, as though the universe were impressed by the swelling of bank accounts. It is rather the sudden opening of a door long shut, the revelation that the resources of creation are not exhausted, and that the one who commands the storehouses of heaven has not overlooked your need. If you were merely an accident of biology, the universe indifferent to your hunger, then there would be little to say but struggle on until the end. Yet, if you are chosen, and the very fact you are listening to these words testifies that you are, then your journey is not one of mere survival. It is a pilgrimage toward provision, ordered by hands more skilled than your own. This hour, this very turning of time, is not a random tick of the clock but a summons. It is the voice saying, step forward now, for the season of delay is over. Consider how many live as captives to fear, measuring every decision by the imagined collapse of tomorrow. Fear chains them to smallness. They shrink their hopes until their dreams fit inside a wallet that is always too thin. But faith refuses to be confined. Faith does not wait until the evidence is safe, but declares that the God who clothed the lilies and fed the sparrows has not forgotten the chosen one. You then must ask yourself, will you interpret your life through the shadow of lack or through the promise of providence? Will you cling to the mindset that says, I was not meant for more? Or will you allow yourself to believe that the hour has arrived when your portion is multiplied, your debts cancelled, your hands filled so that you may also fill the hands of others. A miracle is never solely about the beneficiary, it is about the witness. When your life is suddenly lifted from the mire of financial struggle, others will see not just your relief, but the character of the one who blessed you. This is why such moments are not private indulgences, but public testimonies. To deny the possibility of your miracle is to silence a story that was meant to be told, a story that could awaken faith in the discouraged and courage in the weary. That is why this hour matters. Not next year, not when you feel more ready, but now. Delay is the language of doubt. Readiness is the language of faith. It is important to understand that miracles seldom come wrapped in the wrappings we expect. You may think it should appear as a sudden deposit, a lottery ticket, or a stranger's gift, yet often the miracle takes shape in opportunities. The phone call you almost ignored, the door you almost refused to knock upon, the idea you dismissed as too small. Heaven does not waste resources. What you call coincidence may, in truth, be the orchestration of providence, arranging every detail so that you cannot deny you were seen and chosen. But for this to happen, you must step forward. The hour can be given, yet still missed, if you retreat into fear, if you bury yourself in the soil of hesitation. The miracle waits, but it does not impose itself. It calls, and you must answer. Some may object and say, if this is true, why then do so many never step into such miracles? The answer lies not in the absence of divine generosity, but in the presence of human disbelief. Many prefer the safety of complaining to the risk of trusting. They build walls of cynicism and call it wisdom, never realizing they have shut themselves away from the very blessings they long for. To step into your financial miracle requires more than hope. It requires the courage to live as though the promise were already yours. Speak not as a beggar pleading for crumbs, but as an heir claiming the inheritance already prepared. Do you not see that provision is written into your destiny? You were not designed to endlessly worry over pennies, but to live with a heart that trusts even when the figures do not yet align. There is also a moral weight to this miracle. For abundance is never meant to terminate in selfishness. When heaven enriches your hands, it is so that your hands may become channels. You are chosen not merely to taste prosperity, but to steward it. Imagine a river that refused to flow, hoarding its waters in fear of drought. It would stagnate, grow bitter, and die. Likewise, those who hoard their increase strangle the very purpose of their miracle. The chosen one must live differently, giving as freely as receiving, trusting that the source which poured once will pour again. Thus your financial miracle becomes not only the answer to your private need, but the liberation of many through your generosity. This is why the timing matters. Now is the hour, for others are waiting on the overflow of your obedience. Every generation has its hour, and within that hour, every individual is tested. Some hear the summons and step timidly forward, only to discover that the floor holds beneath their feet. Others delay until the hour passes, and they wake to find themselves unchanged, still enslaved to scarcity, still rehearsing excuses. But you are not like them. You have heard the call in your spirit. This is your hour. Not a vague someday, but a present summons. If you rise to it, you will discover that what you call miracle is simply the natural result of walking in step with the one who owns every field, every treasure, every unseen resource. The choice remains yours. To believe that the season has shifted, or to dismiss it as another hopeful phrase. But in dismissing it, you risk silencing the very story you were meant to live. This introduction is around 1,000 words and stays in the meditative, moral-anchored voice you asked for. Do you want me to expand this into a full speech format with timestamps, like you've been requesting for other titles? Chosen one, this is the appointed hour for you to step into provision, not a distant season. There are moments in life when time itself seems to lean toward us, pressing us forward with a weight we cannot ignore. These are not ordinary moments. They do not arrive by our scheduling, nor do they follow the polite patterns of our calendars. They come as interruptions, sometimes even as disruptions, yet they bear within them the unmistakable evidence of divine timing. To call this your hour is to acknowledge that the waiting you have endured has not been wasted, that every delay was not denial but preparation. What you felt as frustration was in truth the shaping of your heart, the stripping away of illusions, the building of resilience, so that when this hour came you would be able to step into it with clarity, courage, and conviction. There is always a temptation to believe that tomorrow will be better suited, that another season might be more fitting, but such reasoning is often a subtle disguise for fear. Tomorrow promises safety, but it steals the urgency of today. The chosen one must understand that destiny is not postponed indefinitely. There comes a point where the call becomes clear. This is the moment, this is the hour, and hesitation is no longer an option. You may ask why this hour and not another. Why now when circumstances still appear imperfect, when the ground still feels unsteady beneath your feet? The answer is that perfection is not the soil in which miracles grow. If conditions were flawless, if resources were abundant, there would be no need for divine intervention. The mark of the appointed hour is precisely this. It arrives in the midst of imperfection. It intrudes into lack, and it reveals that the provision of heaven does not depend upon the stability of earth. To step into your hour is to declare that what once disqualified you can no longer hold you back, that what once delayed you has run out of power, and that the obstacles you feared have shrunk before the authority of timing ordained beyond your control. Many will miss their hour because they are still waiting for the signs to align according to their expectations. But the chosen one learns to recognize the subtle signs of heaven, a restlessness that refuses to be silenced, a whisper that urges action, a door that creaks open where once there was only a wall. This is not coincidence. It is the design of providence, quietly yet insistently pulling you into the fullness of your purpose. The language of provision is often misunderstood. Some reduce it to numbers, possessions, and accumulation, as though the fullness of destiny could be measured in currency. But true provision is broader, deeper, and richer. It is the alignment of resources, opportunities, and relationships in such a way that your path becomes clear and your steps become strengthened. It is not merely the filling of your purse, but the equipping of your life. And in this hour, you are being invited to walk out of the desert of scarcity into the landscape of abundance, where what you need comes not by scraping and clawing, but by trusting and receiving. This does not mean passivity, it means participation with what has already been set in motion. The chosen one does not sit idly by, hoping for the sky to rain down treasure. The chosen one recognizes that provision often appears disguised as work, as a task, as a responsibility that seems too great, yet hidden within it is the key to overflow. The miracle of this hour is not that everything will suddenly fall into your hands without effort, but that your effort will suddenly bear fruit where once it seemed barren. Fear, however, will attempt to rob you of this moment. Fear will whisper that you are unprepared, that you are unworthy, that your past failures have marked you permanently. Fear thrives on delay. It persuades you to wait just a little longer, to gather a little more evidence, to seek one more confirmation before stepping forward. But delay is the enemy of the appointed hour. When the call is clear, hesitation becomes disobedience. This does not mean recklessness, but it does mean courage. It means trusting that the same hand which orchestrated this timing will also sustain you once you step into it. The chosen one is not asked to possess every answer before beginning, but simply to trust that answers will unfold along the way. The hour is not given because you have mastered everything, but because the one who chose you has deemed you ready enough. To doubt this is to question the wisdom of heaven itself. The humility of faith is to say, I do not see all, but I will move because I am summoned. This appointed hour is not random, nor is it shared equally by all at once. Every life has its appointed seasons, its windows of grace that open wide for a time, and then close again. To recognize your hour is itself a gift. How many live unaware, blind to the opportunities laid before them, deaf to the whisper urging them forward. They miss their moment because they were distracted by lesser things, or because they believed the lie that their moment would always come again. But for the chosen one, awareness is sharpened. You sense in your spirit that this is not like other days. The atmosphere feels charged, the ordinary tinged with the extraordinary. It is as though the world itself pauses to make space for you to step forward. This sense must not be ignored. To ignore it is to drift back into the endless cycle of hoping without moving, longing without claiming. To embrace it is to declare, with both heart and action, that you will not miss what has been appointed for you. And so, you stand at the threshold of provision, summoned not by accident, but by design. You may feel small, yet this hour declares that you are seen as significant. You may feel weak, yet this hour clothes you with strength beyond your own. You may feel uncertain, yet this hour calls you to walk forward as though the ground beneath your feet has already been secured. This is not the promise of someday, vague and distant. This is the reality of now, specific and urgent. This is not a suggestion to consider when convenient, it is a summons to answer without delay. The appointed hour has arrived, and with it, the release of provision you have long prayed for, long waited for, long doubted you would ever see. This is not a dream to be postponed, but a reality to be stepped into. The chosen one cannot afford to look backward now. The weight of preparation is behind you, the call of destiny is upon you, and the abundance of provision lies before you. This is your hour. Financial miracles are not mere wealth, but heaven's orchestration of doors, opportunities, and favor. To see them only as piles of coins or figures in a ledger is to misunderstand the character of provision. The miracle lies not in the possession itself, but in the timing, the alignment, and the undeniable sense that something greater than your own labor has intervened. A sudden opening in your career path, a conversation that connects you to the right person, an unexpected invitation that shifts the course of your life. These are not random happenings. They are the deliberate movements of a hand that writes history with precision. Money may be part of the result, but it is never the whole. To reduce it to wealth alone is to look at the paint and miss the canvas, to count the notes and miss the music. A financial miracle is not about accumulation, it is about transformation, the turning of scarcity into sufficiency and sufficiency into overflow. Think of how easily one can mistake the source. A promotion comes and the mind says, "It was my effort." A contract closes and the heart says, "It was my negotiation." Yet deeper reflection reveals that no amount of effort could have produced the exact constellation of events that occurred. Effort matters, yes, but without favor effort is often wasted, fruitless, or delayed. Favor is what tilts the scale in your direction when logic says otherwise. Favor is the hidden current that carries you faster than your own rowing could ever achieve. Doors may open by skill, but they stay open by grace. To step into a financial miracle is to realize that while your hands sow, heaven sends the rain, and without that rain the soil would remain dry. The orchestration is too intricate to be dismissed as chance, too consistent to be explained by luck. Opportunities are the hidden currency of miracles. They often arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary tasks or small beginnings. Many overlook them because they do not glitter like treasure chests, yet the chosen one learns to discern the subtle spark in what others dismiss. A chance meeting, a suggestion, a sudden idea that refuses to leave the mind. These may be the hinges upon which the door of abundance swings open. The orchestration of a miracle requires attentiveness, for it is not simply what is given, but when it is given, not merely what is offered, but how it connects to everything else. What seems small in isolation becomes immense when fitted into the larger design. A seed looks unimpressive until the harvest reveals its hidden potential. So too the miracle of provision often begins in forms that seem fragile, yet they carry the weight of your future. To speak of financial miracles as orchestration is to acknowledge that you are not abandoned to randomness. There is intention guiding the unfolding of your life. Where you thought lack had the final word, provision steps in with a new script. Where you assumed the door was sealed, favor places a key in your hand. And while wealth itself can be spent, stored, or lost, the orchestration of heaven continues, weaving opportunities into your path, arranging connections you could not have designed, granting access you could never have earned. This is the true miracle, not the gold itself, but the hand that leads you to it. Faith, not fear, is the key to stepping into abundance and breaking the cycle of scarcity. Fear has a way of shrinking the world, of convincing you that there is never enough, that you must clutch tightly to what little you have or risk losing everything. It whispers that opportunities are traps, that generosity is dangerous, that hope is foolish. Fear makes a prisoner of the heart long before chains ever touch the body. It builds invisible walls that keep you from even attempting to walk into the possibilities that have been laid before you. Scarcity is not only the lack of resources, but the mindset that insists lack will always be your portion. The cycle feeds itself. You expect little, so you attempt little, and receiving little confirms the lie that abundance was never meant for you. Faith shatters this cycle by daring to believe in a reality not yet seen, by declaring that provision is possible even when the evidence has not yet appeared. Faith does not deny the existence of challenges, but it refuses to bow to them. Where fear sees obstacles, faith sees pathways. Where fear anticipates failure, faith anticipates favor. It is not blind optimism, nor is it reckless disregard of reality. Faith is a steady gaze fixed on the truth that the same power that clothes the lilies and feeds the sparrows is capable of sustaining the chosen one. It draws its confidence not from bank statements or visible security, but from the unshakable conviction that heaven's resources are unlimited and that its timing is perfect. Faith gives you the courage to act when fear insists on retreat. It urges you to step forward, even trembling, because the act of stepping itself becomes the doorway through which provision flows. Scarcity is broken when the mind no longer agrees with fear's narrative. Every cycle begins with belief, and so the first battle is always internal. Faith reorders the story you tell yourself. Instead of rehearsing all the reasons why you cannot, faith declares the reasons why you must. Instead of clinging to what is safe, faith opens the hand to release and receive. It understands that holding tightly to fear's crumbs prevents you from grasping heaven's feast. In this way, abundance is not only measured in possessions, but in freedom. The person who trusts in provision is free from the torment of worry, free from the anxiety of endless calculations, free from the suspicion that tomorrow will betray them. Faith expands the heart, and with that expansion, capacity grows. Opportunities that were once invisible become clear, doors that were ignored now seem inviting, and connections that once seemed insignificant reveal themselves as vital. To step into abundance, then, is not first about the external, but about the internal shift from fear to faith. The resources may already exist around you, waiting to be gathered, but only faith will give you the eyes to see them and the courage to claim them. Scarcity ends when you no longer accept it as your identity, and abundance begins when you walk as though provision is already flowing toward you. Fear will always whisper, but faith will always answer louder. And in that answer lies the key to breaking the cycle that has held so many captive for far too long. Miracles are testimonies for others, not private indulgences. Your blessing carries a purpose. When provision comes, it is never intended to terminate in the one who receives it. To think otherwise is to misunderstand the nature of a miracle. It is not designed to inflate pride or to create a private sanctuary of comfort. It is a story being written, one that is meant to be read by others who are struggling to believe, who are fighting to keep their hope alive. Every miracle carries within it the seed of witness. What happens in your life becomes the evidence someone else needed to see, the proof that what they longed for is possible. A financial breakthrough in your hands might be the very spark that ignites faith in another's heart. In this way, the miracle is both deeply personal and undeniably public, a testimony that light can break into darkness, and that provision can interrupt lack. It is easy to fall into the temptation of secrecy, to treat the miracle as though it were yours alone, but abundance that is hidden loses part of its power. A testimony unspoken is like a lamp placed under a basket, its glow muted and its influence diminished. The chosen one understands that when provision arrives, it carries with it a responsibility. That responsibility is to bear witness, to speak of what has happened, and to live in such a way that others cannot deny the reality of the blessing. This does not mean boasting or drawing attention to yourself, but pointing clearly to the source from which the miracle came. To testify is to shift the focus away from self and toward the higher purpose behind the blessing. In doing so, the miracle grows beyond you, rippling outward to touch lives you may never directly encounter. There is also a corrective in this truth. When blessings are treated as private indulgences, they quickly become corrupted. Wealth that is hoarded breeds anxiety, not peace. Success that is hidden for self-gratification leaves the soul empty, not full. But when provision is received as a testimony, it transforms both the receiver and the observer. The receiver is humbled, recognizing they are a vessel, not the source. The observer is encouraged, recognizing that what was done for one may also be done for them. In this way, miracles become the language of hope, translated into lives across generations. Your story of breakthrough is not only for you, but for those who have not yet found the courage to believe. To embrace a miracle as testimony is to accept that your life is part of a larger narrative. You are not isolated, not an island, but a witness in the great unfolding of providence. Every provision that enters your hands is both an answer to your need and a message to the world. It declares that scarcity is not the final chapter, that lack does not have the last word, and that favor is still active and alive. The miracle you carry is a living letter, written not for your comfort alone, but for the strengthening of all who will hear it. True abundance requires stewardship, receiving freely, giving freely, and trusting the source again. Provision was never meant to end in the hands of the one who receives it. Like a river, it is healthiest when it flows, nourishing the land it passes through rather than stagnating in stillness. To be entrusted with abundance is to be entrusted with responsibility. The chosen one must learn that generosity is not a suggestion, but a law written into the very fabric of blessing. When resources arrive, they are not only answers to personal prayers, but also tools for the service of others. A hand that only closes around what it has will eventually find it slipping away, while a hand that opens in both receiving and giving will never be empty. Stewardship is more than careful management. It is recognition of ownership. What flows into your life ultimately comes from a source higher than yourself, and what comes from above is never meant to be hoarded below. To receive freely is to acknowledge that you did not create the miracle by your strength alone, that it was placed into your path by favor beyond your control. To give freely is to trust that the same favor will continue to supply you as you release to others. The cycle is broken only when fear interrupts it, whispering that if you give you will lack, or that if you release you may never be replenished. But true abundance rejects such fear. It recognizes that the supply is not finite, that the one who provided once will provide again, and that generosity does not diminish wealth, but multiplies it in unseen ways. There is a profound dignity in living as a steward rather than a hoarder. A hoarder clings desperately, afraid to lose, but a steward manages wisely, knowing that what has been entrusted must also be extended. Abundance given to a steward becomes a blessing not just to their household, but to entire communities, for stewardship carries within it the vision of overflow. Your provision is not yours alone. It is meant to move through you, to transform lives, to feed the hungry, to lift the weary, to open doors for others who could not open them on their own. In this way, true abundance becomes a testimony not only of what you have, but of how you use it. Trusting the source again is the final mark of stewardship. Each act of receiving and each act of giving becomes an opportunity to reaffirm that the river has not dried up. Even when resources seem to diminish, the steward does not panic, because they understand that the same hand that once filled their cup is still able to do so again. They are not enslaved to the rise and fall of numbers because their confidence rests in something more secure. This is what sets true abundance apart from mere wealth. Wealth alone can vanish. Stewardship ensures that abundance continues, sustained by trust and multiplied by generosity. In this flow, the chosen one discovers the freedom of never fearing tomorrow, for they know the source is faithful, and their role is simply to keep the channel open.